Welcome to The Vital Vagina, where we delve into brave and crucial conversations about the womb and feminine power. This podcast is not just for people with vaginas. We all come from the womb, and there is much for everyone to learn from this place of deep wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Danielle Cornelius. I'm a chiropractor and holistic pelvic care provider. I've been working in the feminine healing realm for nearly a decade, and I am honored to bring this work and these stories to light. I am so tickled to have Evian Whitney on my podcast. She was actually one of the inspirations for me getting this one going. She has got a podcast of her own called The Sexually Liberated Woman, and I highly recommend checking it out. She is a wealth of knowledge. She's just such an encouraging, wonderful person, and I love the work that she's doing to help people come into their more sensual natures. And our conversation is really interesting. We go into lots of different topics, but as someone who's been listening to her podcast for a long time, I often get to hear about other people, and I was really always wanting to learn more about her and her background, so I got a chance to ask her a bunch of questions. So, hey, Evian.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going really well. How are you?
Really well. Thank you so much for being one of my very first conversations on this podcast.
Oh, I'm so excited. Like when you first told me that you were doing a podcast, I screamed because I'm really, really excited to not only just like be here, but to also learn from you and to have everyone else learn from you.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. And you actually helped inspire me a little bit because I think my coach told me I really should do a podcast when I was thinking about where I want to put content. And it was right after you had interviewed me on your podcast, and I got a lot of attention from that. And so it really gave me kind of a boost to go forward.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, I loved that conversation. I still get so many people who come up to me, and I say come up to me as though people are actually like coming up to me, but like people who put like, send me messages, emails, things like that, saying that particular episode about pelvic health and yoni eggs, it just really changed things for them. So yeah, I'm so pleased to have been one of the catalysts to get you to start your own podcast.
Yay. Yeah, the conversation is so important, and I'm really glad that people are so much more open to just talking about these things in the open than they were before, like when I first started.
Yeah, because we need it. There's so many people who listen to that particular episode and we're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea even like about like what pelvic health care looks like, which is wild to me to think that here we are in the year 2018 and we just don't have those kinds of conversations, or people don't have this kind of information. So yeah.
It's incredible to me too, because I take it for granted now. I've been doing this work for quite a while. And so like, I'll just start talking about vaginas, like everywhere I go. And I forget sometimes that some people's faces will turn red or they're just not quite ready for it. It's very jarring.
Yeah. It's the same way with me in my work. Like I talk about sex so often that it just doesn't really faze me anymore. And it's only when someone asks me what I do and I tell them, they're like, oh my gosh. And I forget that is a thing. Like it is taboo for some people.
Yeah, well, that's the perfect segue. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Evian Whitney. I call myself a sexuality doula. I'm a sex educator and a sex activist. And basically what my work looks like is helping to facilitate, educate, and heal women and femme-identifying folks out of their sexual shame, their sexual trauma, and get them into erotic expressions that feel good for them, that feel liberating to them, whatever that looks like.
Oh, that's beautiful. What's your story? What led you to this work?
Oh my gosh. Well, first I want to say that this was not the job that I thought I was going to be doing with my life. I was actually going into a totally different direction. I originally went to school for cosmetology. I was a hairdresser for a little bit and I ended up hating it. But one thing that I realized that was a common thread amidst jobs that I just was not enjoying doing was that I always came back to writing. And so during this time when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I was going through some pretty challenging times in my my own relationship regarding sex and sexuality. And I was using writing as a way to process those things. I was using writing as a way to understand who I was as a sexual person, and to try to figure out why I was having all of these sexual hangups. And I instead of doing it in a regular diary format where no one else reads it, I created a blog where I was talking about my sexual hangups and things like that. And shortly after I started writing about those things, and then also just writing about the things that I was curious about and the things that I was learning based on the healers and teachers that I was learning from, a lot of people were asking me when I was going to teach workshops, or when I was going to write a book, or how they could work with me. And this was pretty early on. I'd say within the first year of me coming out publicly with this particular blog. And I was looking at these people like, are you crazy? Like, why on earth would you want to learn from me? I know nothing. But it took a couple years before I finally started thinking about actually doing this work in a real way. Because I kept hearing it. I kept hearing people saying, I want to work with you. I feel like because I know who you are and because of how vulnerable you've made yourself about your own struggles, like that makes me feel like I can trust you. And so, after maybe about 3 years after I started writing was when I finally took the plunge and was like, all right, let's see about me creating a practice where I work with women one-on-one to help them out of their sexual shame and to give them tools and resources to embrace their sexuality in ways that feel really good for them. And initially, when I first started doing these one-on-one sessions, I told myself that I was probably going to hate it, and I was probably going to be bad at it. And after that, then I could just like leave and never do it again. But I did about maybe 10 sessions in that first month, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the work, and I was really helping people, which so surprised me. I was like, wow, I actually do know a thing or two. And so basically, it's been about almost 9 years that I've been doing this work, both in the writing realm and then also in the one-on-one work. And this is my life's purpose. This is what I'm going to be doing as a career for the rest of my life.
Oh, isn't that such a great feeling?
It is such a great feeling, especially because like I just remember having these really hard and frustrating conversations with my parents who were like, you need to go to college. You need to go to school. You need to both my parents thought that I was going to be like my mom wanted me to be a news broadcaster. She was very, very like gung ho about that. And, but I knew that I wanted to do something more. And I knew that I wanted to use my unique story, my writing, my voice to help others. And it feels really gratifying to see all of these pieces come together in such a big way like that.
She was probably having visions of you like in media, like you're doing right now.
Yeah.
It's just that's like the paradigm her psyche would have understood it in at that time.
That's a really interesting thing to think about, because I haven't thought about it in that way. You know, when she first told me that she wanted me to be a news broadcaster, I'm like, oh my God, this is not what I want to do at all. Like, I don't want to do the big hair. I don't want to do the news broadcaster voice. That is not me. And even though I'm totally not in that realm or in that industry, I've definitely had to be put in places where I'm, speaking, or where my face is in front of a camera, or I'm getting interviewed. And so that's really interesting. I should mention that to her. She'll get a kick out of that, knowing that like all along you knew. Maybe it didn't turn out the way that you thought it would, but yeah.
Well, the world has changed.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of your mom, that was one of the best podcast or episodes that you have, was listening to you and your mom talk to each other. I thought it was so cute. It's so cute.
Thank you. Yeah, that is by far one of my favorites. I'd say the episode that I did with my sister is my second favorite, because those conversations were just so raw and so vulnerable. And the one thing that I tell people who are like, I loved that conversation, I'm like, I had no idea what was going to happen. Particularly with my mom, there are a lot of things she said in that conversation that was brand news to me. So it was just a really beautiful experience chance to hear her story, to give her space to tell her story, because I don't think that there was anyone who was asking her questions about her sex life or, her sexual upbringing and, the traumas and experiences that she had growing up. So it was a really, really cool experience.
I love that. Yeah, it's true. So many women, especially, just don't get their stories told.
Yeah.
And, it's especially in this pelvic space, and when it comes to sex or vaginas or the womb or pregnancy loss or all of this whole realm of stuff that it stays hidden, and it's really sad. And it's really heartwarming to me that all of us are starting to speak more openly about all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and for my mom, especially, she's from a totally different generation. I mean, she has an iPhone, she has a blog, and I think occasionally she'll use Instagram, but like she wasn't brought up in this world in the way that I was to be like, yeah, if you've got your life, like flaunt it, talk about these things. I mean, I'm surrounded by people who are constantly talking about their sex lives, probably because of the work that I do. But I also just think that people are a lot more open than people were like 50 years ago. And so I think for my mom, I don't know if she thought that she had permission to talk about that. And I even remember her saying, like, why would you want to hear my story? Like, I'm just some old woman. And I'm like, no, are you kidding me? Like, we need to hear stories like yours. And not just the younger generation, like not just folks like me, but other women who are in your generation need to hear those stories too. And yeah, it was incredibly healing. And it's so funny, right after that conversation, she was like, so when are we going to do the next episode? I have ideas. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So now she's wanting to potentially start her own podcast, which, I mean, I don't know if that's going to go anywhere, but we'll see.
Yeah, I love it. I love it that it inspired her to want to speak more. I've noticed that when I work in circles, as people share more of these stories, they realize like, oh, it's not just me. And it's, I don't know. It's just really amazing to watch what people from all different generations sharing with each other.
Yeah.
That makes me wonder, your clientele, do you work with mostly people of like the millennial generation, or are you finding that there's people of all ages that are interested in your work?
I've had people from all ages, which surprised me at first, mostly because I struggle with imposter syndrome. And so when 50-year-old women were coming to me wanting answers and, guidance regarding their sex lives, I was like, are you kidding? Like, I'm a young whippersnapper. I know nothing. You've been on this earth longer than I have. Like, why should you listen to me? But I quickly learned that the wisdom that I have to give will absolutely and has absolutely affected them and has made their sexual liberation journeys that much more rich and more healing. I would say predominantly I get women who are between the ages of like 22 and like 35. But the oldest woman that I've worked with, I think she was like 50, 54. So, and it's the one thing that I'm realizing about this work is that like, no matter how old you are, like this stuff affects us all. It may not show up in the exact same ways, but we all have similar histories and similar traumas, around sex and sexuality. We all have the same taboos, So, I feel really, really lucky to have clients who entrust me with their stories and allow me to hold space for them and guide them in this process, which is really scary, especially like the one woman that I was working with who was in her 50s. She had never really talked about sex, and she'd never had an orgasm, and so there's a lot of shame for her in being able to be like, I raised kids, like I was married for 20 plus years, and here I am. I have no idea who I am as a sexual being. There's a lot of shame that comes with that, and so I just feel really lucky that there are people out there who see the work that I do and understand the ethos behind the work that I do and trust me with those stories because they're really vulnerable.
Yeah, I have that experience in my work too.
Yeah.
And the deeper you go into it and the more you hear these stories, it's just quite profound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, now I want to know more about your, what's the challenge that you do on Instagram? What do you do once every couple of months or so?
Yeah. So, this year I started the sensual selfie challenge, which happened in March, which was great. It was a wonderful experience. Lots and lots of people showed up for that. And then I did it again in September, kind of following the same guidelines, the same format. And I believe I like tripled the amount of people who took the challenge, which like blew my mind. I was not physically, emotionally, energetically prepared for that much for that much participation. But basically, the sensual selfie challenge is a challenge I created that inspires and encourages women and femme identifying folks to take naked selfies of themselves. And sometimes they're not naked. I noticed that some people felt more comfortable just being fully clothed, but having a sensual essence come through in their selfies. But really, like, I created this as a way for people to celebrate their sexualities and to celebrate their bodies, and to also create this really amazing community where we could look at other people's photos and see that, like, you know, there's so many different body types, colors, shapes, sizes, ages, and we all get to claim that we are sexual beings. We all get to claim that we are sensual beings. And yeah, it was like born in my kitchen the first time that I started thinking about it. I was like, I should do a challenge, and it should be like a selfie challenge. But I had a lot of concerns about that because, you know, I wasn't sure if people would show up to do it. Because I mean, taking sensual photos on the internet is really risky business. And I mean, it is for all of us, you know, but especially for folks like me folks who aren't like me, who aren't doing work like this. I mean, it can really like tarnish your reputation because, you know. Yeah. But then the other part that I was thinking of that almost made me not do it is because, you know, I've heard so many people say that taking selfies is frivolous and it's vanity and it's superficial. And so there was this part of me that thought, I don't think anyone's going to want to actually do this because there's better things to do. You know, like there are other causes that we can take up rather than taking selfies. And sure enough, I mean, I think that this has really, really resonated with people in a way that I did not even recognize. And I'm already thinking like, oh my gosh, if I do this again, I need a little bit more reinforcement because it was a lot. It was beautiful. There was so much joy, so much celebration, but there was also a lot of like hard stuff that was coming up for people.
Yeah, I can imagine. Probably lots of different layers of hard stuff on many different levels. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, we had people who were being accosted in their Instagram private messages by men trying to solicit them for sex. I mean, we had some really unfortunate things happen where someone actually lost her job because her job found out that she was taking photos like these. Someone from her job saw, and then that person told their job. Like, it was just, it was crazy. It was just crazy. And, obviously I don't want for that to happen to anyone. And I remember feeling a sense of blame of like, oh my gosh, all I wanted was for this to be freeing and celebrating and for people to find a sense of liberation in it. But it actually caused some great hardships for people, you know, which lets me know that there is so much work that needs to be done.
There's so much work that needs to be done. And it says a lot more about the systems than it does about your work. Because your work is also an act of resistance to teach people how to especially come into their sensuality and do it in a way that has their own boundaries. I've paid some attention to that during the time, and I could see how you were really good at holding really firm boundaries and teaching other people how to do that for themselves. And unfortunately, the world we live in is dangerous, and it's kind of is what it is at the moment. And this is what we're all kind of learning how to deal with and push past and It's a lot. The patriarchy and the white supremacist system is pretty heavy. And so anytime you push up against it, you're going to get some pushback.
Yeah. And I appreciate you for saying that, because, the one thing that I realized during this last round of the challenge is that I can only hold space so much. And I feel like this comes up a lot in the work that I do too, not just with this challenge, but also with the work that I do one-on-one with people. It's so important that I take care of myself. It's so important that I do the best that I can not to be responsible for other people's stuff. To a certain extent, that's part of my job. But beyond that, it's not my job to internalize it. It's not my job to fix anything. It's not my job to help people, heal themselves in ways that I can't do that for them, So yeah.
None of us can. None of us can.
Yeah. I'm always coming back to the realization that my job is to guide people. It's to hold space for people and let them and give them permission to find parts of themselves and reclaim parts of themselves that haven't been able to be expressed because of the patriarchy, because of white supremacy, because of racism, all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's hard work.
It is so hard. I actually want to know what you do to take care of yourself, because my work, I'm not actually putting physical hands on people. And I always think about people who are doctors, massage therapists, people who actually work in person on people with their own hands. I imagine that it's just as, if not more, exhausting and energetically, emotionally taxing. So I'd love to hear about how you take care of yourself and what sort of boundaries you keep for yourself.
Yeah, that was really hard for me in the very beginning. And people would tell you not to take people's stuff on, but nobody would tell you how to not do that. You're well, I'm in this field because I want to help people. So chances are I'm pretty empathic and I don't even know I'm taking on other people's stuff until it's too late. But Tammy Kent actually is when I started studying with her, I started really, really learning how to hold boundaries. In the first few years of practice, if a case came in that really hit me in the heart, I would go home and cry. I was just I would be oh man, I would just carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. But I started to learn how that's not serving people. We all have to walk through our journeys, and there's a certain amount and we're all capable of it. And so that started helping me on the intellectual level. And I also started to being able to see how resilient people are. And so that helped me. And then when I'm hovering over them, Tammy Kent said one time, when you plant a seed, you don't want to hover over the seed and be why aren't you growing?
So true.
It won't get any of its rain. It won't get any of the sunlight it needs. You have to and then you just need, when it's a garden, you just need to water it a little bit and let it integrate and do its thing. So I just have a lot of faith in the capacity for healing. And so that has helped me a lot. And I also have learned how to stand in the face of pain and darkness and hold space for that and not get too swayed by it and not feel like I am supposed to be the one to fix it. I'm just there to hold space.
Ooh, those are lessons I'm still learning.
Yeah, it's hard. And, certain cases will come through and they'll be, it'll get kind of through that boundary. I also have had to learn how to very consciously in the beginning, I had to tell myself their energy is separate from my energy and they're separate from me. And I would have to do certain visualizations and little rituals, when I start my day and when I end my day, just to kind of mark okay, this is the space for that. And here's space for me.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I'm still learning those things. I feel like it's a constant process because there's also an unlearning that has to happen for me. What you were talking about in terms of being reminded that people are really resilient. I think I forget that. I forget that that people have the capacity to heal themselves, and it's not my job necessarily to heal them. It's my job to give them permission to access that part of themselves that knows that they can heal themselves. But it's hard. It's so hard to to remember that, especially as a chronic caretaker, like a chronic nurturer like me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, no, do you need stuff? I'll give you everything that you need.
I know. Yeah. That's like you and I both have that Virgo. There's a lot of strength in Virgo, and well, like everything has a strength and a downfall.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Virgo energy.
Virgo energy can be funny that way. But it can be a beautiful thing, the way we like to serve. And Virgo also is the sign of like a woman unto herself, or the sign of sovereignty. And so if you kind of also remember, like, we are all our own people. Have you ever worked with a coach or like a counselor or anybody who you felt like was just directing you so much that you couldn't even like integrate?
Have I?
Like,
yeah. I'm trying to think. Have I don't think that I have. And I don't know if that's because like I have good experiences in picking people, or not. But yeah, I usually, I don't know. I just, I don't have that problem. Thank God.
Thank goodness. Yeah. I haven't really had that too much either, because I have strong boundaries for myself, especially. But, there is something to be said just for kind of gently nudging people along, and their self-esteem will be so much better when you allow them to go through that, a lot of that learning yourself. You're just facilitating, and you, like me and Shara and a lot of other people doing this type of work, have become like utter nerds for this work that we do. So we've just become like knowledge banks that people come to because they haven't had the time or the, that passion to like just devour all this information. So that's what you're offering them. It's not that they can't, that you really have something that they don't have to be able to heal. It's just that you've decided to hold space for that specific type of healing for people when they're ready for it at that time. And you can't control the outcome or what people end up doing. Everyone has free will.
Right. Oh, so true. So true.
Free yourself. Free yourself. Oh, that was a good question.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question that I am trying to get into the practice of asking other healers, other people who do this like really important work around facilitating healing for others. I think we need to be talking about self-care more. The one question that I think about a lot, and I think I heard this through a therapy session that I was in years ago, was like, who heals the healers? Like, who holds space for the space holders? Who's the one that is giving medicine to the medicine women? And I'm always thinking about that for myself. I don't always have the answer to that question, but I'm always aiming to try to be better for myself.
I think that goes back to some of the cultural issues that we have, or the systemic issues that we have in our systems. Because it's bringing to mind a story one of my teachers told me, and right now I'm not remembering who it was, so hopefully that'll come to me later. But they were talking about how back when we were a little more tribal, and there were shamans in the cultures, like the whole culture would take care of the shaman. They would feed them and clothe them and house them, because they understood that work that they did was so deep and important and like so necessary that they didn't have to like also go like do the bookkeeping. And so like I think that's part of being when we live a little bit more in alignment with nature, I think we would instinctively take care of our healers a little bit better. We would also have a lot more honor around sex, and we would have a lot more honor around people, like bodies and all the things. I feel like so many of the little things that are such major ills in our culture, I feel like are connected to like how disconnected we are from natural cycles. Absolutely. And when I heard that story, I just remember it hitting me really hard. Like, oh, that's so true. And that's what we really need to be doing, is taking care of our healers.
And I mean, it sucks that we, in this, I mean, I'm sure that there are things that we can do, but it's not built into our culture in that way. Like, we have to try extra hard to put those practices into place, And I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot because things have been really, really busy on my end with work in ways that hasn't haven't ever been before. So and I'm the type of person that will do everything. Like I will have calls with my clients, and then I will cook a full dinner from scratch, and I will be taking care of my elderly dog, and I will be doing laundry, and like these days I've been trying to give myself permission to be like, let's see if we can delegate that to someone else. Even if it means like I don't make dinner, I'm going to spend extra money to get something delivered to me, or I ask my husband to take the dog out, or I even if I check in with myself and I'm just not feeling great and I have to reschedule my clients for the day. I mean, it's so important to have those things be a priority, but it's really hard to ask for that help.
It really is. And we're all getting a lot better about it. Like, and I've noticed too, there's so many of us are getting better at like kind of going with the flow and asking for support. And then we all still will feel guilty about it too. Like, I'm so sorry. Can we reschedule? Right. Or I'm so sorry. And it always comes with this, I'm so sorry. And I'm grateful because I've been in this realm for several years now. And so we've all gotten so much better about just like letting some of the pressure of all of that kind of go, and trust that it's all going to the timing's going to work out okay. The other thing that came to my mind when you were telling that story, and now it just left.
Well, I will say that is one of my favorite things about my friendship with you. I feel like you have been perhaps the only person in my life who has given me that kind of grace. Like if I have to say, hey, I'm not feeling good today, or I'm in a weird mental health space, or like shit happened and I have to reschedule, I never feel from you like a sense of guilt or a sense of like, oh, that sucks. You're just like, yeah, no worries. Like I can flow with you. And that's been like just watching you be able to receive me with so much grace and to give me so much compassion and space to do my own thing and to just be flexible. It's been such a gift. And I'm so grateful for that. Not just because like you're awesome and I feel really, really special to be able to like call you a friend and that you can give me that space, but I'm also gifting that to other people. Like my sister has chronic pain, and sometimes when we're trying to see each other, she has to cancel last minute because she's like, I'm having a pain flare. There's no way that I can make it, or I'm feeling really tired. Before I would have been like, oh my God, you're canceling again. Or like, why didn't you tell me that 24 hours ago? I need 24-hour notice. But these days I'm just like, no, it's fine. Like take care of your body. I'll be here for you if you need anything. I'm happy to flow with you. And so, I really just wanted to highlight that because that's been one of the most profound parts for me on my end of our friendship.
Oh, thank you. And that does remind me of what I was thinking and how much that we just need to start building that into our community. I'm constantly telling women, especially because they're the ones that tend to hold on more, and femme people in general, like, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. And it's like, no, right. Just, we can give each other more permission, and the more we relax guilt for other people, and the more we also trust that we can be in each other's lives for long periods of time, and that we can't be in everyone can't be up each other's butts all the time.
Seriously.
Like, there's a lot for all of us to go around, and we can go deep into time also. And so I always just remind myself that time is now, but it also is in the future. And it's okay. It's okay. Like the cycles come back around again. And here we are. We always end up finding a time.
Yeah. I mean, having this conversation is a huge testament to that.
I think it was the same thing for our last one too. When I was on yours, it was like, I personally I used to be like so hardcore about time, which is funny. I was like fully switched because I was so intense about it that when I relaxed it like as much as I was intense before.
Yeah.
So I got to see what it felt like to have to be really frustrated at somebody for like having a hard day or like having pain, and because they're not on my like minute by minute schedule. Right. So once I saw like how absurd that was, I just let it go fully.
Well, especially in this day and age, I feel like I have the capacity more so now than ever before to give people space, because shit is fucked up right now. Like really, really bad. Like we have so much stuff that we're holding on to, so many things that we're having to process. I mean, things have always been hard, you know, and we all go through our challenges, but I mean, the onslaught, especially in this like political climate that we're in, it's just been so rough. And knowing that like we're all in this soup that feels really like hopeless sometimes, and just like it feels like we're being constantly inundated with bad news or anxieties or worries. Like I feel like I am able to give people a little bit more permission to just like not be on my timetable, because I'm like, the shit is real, you know, like it's really hard out there.
Well, and I stopped worrying about time so much because it clicked with me that that's what the patriarchy really is like everything, it has to be on a time clock.
Right there. That's it.
And so I was like, well, fuck that. Because like, that's kind of like where that, you know, when we talk about like that hypermasculinity, that's to me what it is. When the linear part of us has become so like solidified that that's the only thing that we're valuing is that we're on time. Like, are we not valuing like loving each other and like trying to heal some of this collective trauma that's just up and everything's so raw? And so like, there's just, like you said, there's not only is everyone having a hard time, but like we have way more important things to worry about.
Seriously. So basically what I'm hearing you say is be late because that is an act of resistance. Maybe not literally. I mean, obviously be on time for your job.
You know what's funny? I mean, I can say that because I'm self-employed, so are you. So we do live in a different world.
Right. But I mean, for other people, I don't think that would work.
But however, as you know, as a chiropractor, you know, so when I have to see people for like holistic pelvic care and I need to spend a half an hour or an hour with them, it's more important that there's a timeliness. But I've also learned, like, even when I'm seeing people like chiropractors do, like a little more quickly over time, I've known some chiropractors who get super stressed out about people coming in exactly on time, because it's going to ruin their whole schedule. And it's like this whole thing. And in my experience so far, it flows okay. Like some people show up early, some people show up chronically late. Some people are like always right on time. And if you just allow it, it like tends to most of the time work itself out.
That's the thing, you know, like it's literally not the end of the world. It really isn't, you know, no. It's just not.
No, clean drinking water might be the end of the world. But not being on time, probably not. Exactly. Well, that's probably a really good place to end it.
I would say so.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell people where they can find you, and if you have anything going on right now you want to share with people.
So they can find me on my website, which is where I first got my start writing about sex and sexuality. It is sexloveliberation.com, and there they can read my essays, and then they can also learn a little bit more about the work that I do. And then the thing that I'm pretty excited about, and I have been excited about, is my podcast. It's on hiatus right now, but it will be coming back super soon. And my podcast is called The Sexually Liberated Woman. And I feel so pleased to be able to have had folks like you and my mom and just other badass sexual healers and educators and activists who are on talking about all things sex positivity and just wanting to heal this rift about sex, sexuality, sensuality, all of it. So those are the places that they can find me. Oh, and if anyone is on Instagram, they can also find me at evian.whitney. And you can see my selfies and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And you have so many podcast episodes now that people can go and binge on even if you are
totally. I've got a really great back catalog. I think I have like 38 episodes, not including the bonus one. Right. So have fun, feel free. There's so many great conversations, and I'm just really proud of the work that I've done, particularly on the podcast, because I think it just gives a different way for people to interact with me and the work that I do, you know? Yeah,
that's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for, again, being one of my first conversations.
Yeah, here. Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled. I'm, like I said, when you told me that you were starting a podcast, I was like, oh my God, yes, finally.
That's awesome. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find show notes at vitalvagina.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and share with your friends. We'll be back next week with another episode.